Thank you for joining us tonight. The Rye Youth Council exists to support the social, emotional health, and mental well-being of children, teens, and young adults in our community. And we do this by educating, engaging, and empowering kids in partnership with families, schools, and community. Our programs offered for free or a nominal charge are created to improve the emotional strength of children and families that need to find balance and focus, excel through transitions, and become strong, independent, and resilient individuals. Tonight, we're going to hear from two professionals from the Learning Consultants. Please help me in welcoming Kathleen Brigham and Jean Card.
Stand out of the glare.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, well, thanks you guys for coming. This is something I've had on my to-do list actually for a long time because a lot of families I work with have a lot of questions. So I'm really happy to present this, and I'm really glad that we can film it and share it with the larger community. And just want to thank Rye Youth and also the library for hosting. It's nice to have this opportunity. So let me just give you a little background because we have a lot to cover tonight, and we want to leave you feeling like you have some real skills to take home with you. But Jean and I are lucky enough to work for Daryl Capuano, who runs the Learning Consultants. And he started this about 20 years ago in northern Connecticut. And it's a sort of a boutique, small tutoring company that really specializes on one-on-one and very hands-on tutoring. We do pretty much everything from elementary through college, test prep, career counseling, college counseling. But Jean and I, our sweet spot is this executive functioning. Kids have some sort of learning challenge. And that's what we both do. Jean has actually graciously come down from Madison, Connecticut, where she has her crop of students. And then I'm here tutoring, and I also run Westchester in Fairfield County and New York City. So that's sort of a little bit about who we are. Much of our work, as I said, is around organization, executive functioning, study skills, all these labels that basically come under the same idea of having trouble getting organized. And we're going to explain that in detail to you guys tonight. So for me, I came from an education background and worked in a lot of different schools. Always had a tutoring interest and always did one-on-one tutoring. And then I went back to school and did some work in learning disabilities specifically. So that's where I came in, and always was at a school, one American school in London or in New York City at Dwight. I always had that population of kids who fell through the cracks. Some of them weren't really diagnosed, some of them people couldn't figure out, and it was like, boom, here you go, figure it out. So it's always been a huge interest of mine to figure these kids out and how their brains are working and what motivates them and what supports them. Jean has a really interesting background that she came from the therapy side. So she was a social worker and worked in a lot of schools that have programs for children, like the Franklin School, which is a lot of kids on the spectrum, and also the Grove School, which is a therapeutic school. So we sort of are this perfect combination because we always joke that being a tutor, you actually are half teacher and half therapist. So if you split us and put it together, it works pretty well. And then the other part that we both have is challenges at home, because we have our own kids that have had a lot of learning struggles. So we've lived it, and we've been in the trenches with you guys as well.
So I think you guys are all old enough to remember those Rogaine commercials. It's like, I'm not just own the company, I'm a client myself.
So tonight, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to hand it over to Jean, and she's going to give a great overview of what executive functioning is. And then I'm going to come back and sort of say what you see at home and what you can do, have that little toolkit for you. But the challenge for you is a little bit of executive functioning tonight. How are you going to remember? So giving you some paper, I would suggest jotting down some things, circling what's important, and highlighting for what I want to remember. All these great tools that we're going to talk to you about, because we'd like to run through it and then make sure that we've answered your really specific questions. So have them. If we haven't done it by the end, we'll certainly answer them. But jot some things down so you don't forget. Perfect. Okay? Great. All yours.
Okay, so this is part of what Kathleen was saying is and kind of what are the reasons that brought you all here. These are maybe some questions that may have led you to sign up tonight. Maybe you want to learn more about what executive function is exactly. It's certainly out there a lot as a topic now. And then, is that maybe what is having my child at home struggle? Is that why the backpack is being brought to school by mom every other day? Maybe you're wondering if you have some executive function challenges. I not only have a child, but I have a spouse. I had to be at the high school in Madison this morning at 7, and he's traveling. I said, babe, remember, tomorrow morning, when you wake up in Dallas, I'm at school at 7. Sure enough, there are the phone messages. Are you up? Are you okay? Remember I said it's okay. And then, really, I'm guessing a lot of you may be wondering, how do you support your kid at home day in, day out to help things feel smoother, go better, because most of our kids do pretty well holding it together at school all day and fall apart when they get home. Right? So that would probably feel better for everyone if we found some of those pieces. So here's how we've kind of organized it, okay? So we're going to learn about how people with executive function think. So let's run through terminology. Some of the hurdles, that's what Kathleen was talking about. What does it look like? How does it manifest at home? Some of the implications of having executive function, what you need to do, and then hopefully we'll wrap up with some of the knowledge again. Okay. So this is some of the terminology, just kind of an overview that I want you thinking about. General categories that you can, every time these things come up, I want you thinking about your child and where it may show up, okay? So planning and organizing behavior and activities over time. Are they able to override immediate demands to sustain attention and complete a task? Emphatic head shaking already. And then, can they monitor and manage thoughts and emotions? So, those are kind of the general categories. I want you to think about executive function skills like a conductor, okay? So in a symphony, the conductor is leading and saying, up with the wind section, down with the percussion, okay? That is missing in students who have executive function. So that overriding emotion, bringing up the ability to focus, that's what's missing that a lot of us take for granted in our day-to-day. So imagine their conductor is gone in there, okay? And that's, I want to be clear, it's very different than a learning profile, right? So when Kathleen and I were saying, we're not just sort of here as experts day in, day out doing this with students, but we've lived this at home.
We're not going to have a selective ability to focus.
So yeah, we'll cover that. So Kathleen's got some examples, and I think for your particular child, I think there may be situations, and there may be just general adolescence. So to be clear, I know we went through our piece. I have 3 sons. The oldest is now 23, and that still shows up. So I'm not sure, no disrespect, as the male brain, they say, doesn't mature till like 25. Where does that fall, right? That can be the other hard piece of this. What is that? Is that typical teenage boy, teenage girl? Is it actually something with executive function? Okay. But it's okay. Executive skills are different than learning differences. My middle son, who's about to turn 22, has dyslexia, which I always say is a buy one, get 3 free. So he has ADD, he has executive function, and he has some anxiety. So knowing in that amalgam what is showing up when is really clear in terms of how to help them. So make sure executive function is kind of more that override, but they still may have a learning profile issue that contributes, right? So the dyslexia shows up with decoding and working memory, but the executive function shows up when he is a musician, and in high school his trumpet was his favorite praised item, and it would be sitting in the mudroom multiple days. So, all right. So these are the cogs I want you thinking about. The big 2 gears that make executive function happen are cognition and behavior. And there are topics within each of those, but think about those cogs working together, the cognition and the behavior, to get that gear of executive function working well. Okay. So here are some of the cognition pieces. Within cognition, 3 main categories: planning, working memory, and metacognition. Okay, a little bit of a plug that I will give to myself and Kathleen. This metacognition piece for me is the keystone. Lots of people have brought students to tutors and they're over here on this part. They're like, okay, get a planner. Here's this piece, put it in. Okay? Here, do some flashcards. The metacognition, the thinking about thinking, they don't have that. That reflective ability of why did this go well, why didn't this go well? And if you're not engaging that and feeding that skill in them to understand why this planner or that planner did not work, then it just seems like a sort of task of exhaustion to them. You're just making them do a planner. We're really good at harvesting that piece. I've worked with so many students who say to me, well, I don't know, they just told me to do that. Okay, let's engage and do that. And that includes when things go well. Why did that test go well? What did you do differently? They haven't even been prompted to think about that. So growing those skills become huge. So these are the cognition pieces, okay? Behavior. So this is sort of the when they get home stuff that we maybe all kind of experience sometimes, right? The response inhibition, something doesn't go well, the ability to stave that emotion off, which kind of feeds into emotional control. Sustained attention, that's something to kind of watch. I worked with a student once who genuinely and candidly said to me the longest he thought he could attend was 15 minutes. High school student. That's a long night that he would have ahead of him. I was so appreciative that he was honest. He had a lot of work to do, right? Task initiation, that's a big one that I know Kathleen is going to talk about tonight, is sort of the getting going on an activity. That seems to be a big category. So that's what I mean, as we're going through this, I want you all kind of highlighting where and what is showing up for your student, because it's going to vary. It's not going to be the same for everyone, okay? And then flexibility, okay? Like that was a big one for my son. He's not a big, do not throw changes at him. Do not do it. He's a senior in high school, senior in college, and wow, who's my working memory? And he changed apartments. And my husband and I are talking to him, and he's just crabby and grouchy, and I'm like, what is going on with him? And I'm thinking, you dope. You've been parenting him this long. It was the change. The change, it should have been great. This new apartment, things weren't in place for him within his apartment, the change to a new space. So that flexibility that then had triggered the emotional control was all bubbling up for him, okay? But that's where we had a little metacognition talk of, hey buddy, take a look at what's going on, take a few steps back, okay? So Kathleen is gonna run through some specific kind of vignettes to help you guys see each of those pieces, where they kind of show up in students she's worked with.
Hi. Sorry, Dennis. You guys do that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through basically, I made up like 3 kids. And I'm gonna go through each one and hopefully you recognize them or parts of them, and I want you to really walk away with some things you can do at home. Okay, so what does this look like at home? So let's start with Samantha. All right, she's the one who can't get started. She might be cleaning up around her desk, sharpening pencils, papers. She might just be staring at her computer, and you're thinking, what is going on? Like, just start. Like, put your fingers on the, keyboard and start typing. Start doing your math. Just get started. What you have to understand about the student is all about the initiation. And they are told all day long, just start. Just get out a piece of paper. Just start writing. Just do your homework. Just do this. And if that is the hardest part for them, imagine how frustrating that is for them. So if you can think of it as almost like a watershed, if you get that initiation started, then everything else tends to come along a little bit more easily. That focus is so much more helpful than just do it. And we're going to get to what to do with them specifically. But I want you to understand that that's the difficulty, is initiation. Along with that comes focusing. It's really hard for this type of student to stop one thing and start another. All right? So they're in the middle of their homework, you have dinner. Or you say you've been doing English long enough, now we know go to soccer practice. It's really challenging for them. And then they have to get back and initiate again, by the way. So this then bumps up against time management, right? A lot of these students don't even know how long it takes. How long does it take you to do your English? How much time do you need to plan for that essay? They have no idea. So you think, oh, just sit down and start that. Well, they might think, is it going to be 5 minutes? Is it going to be 4 hours? I don't know. So we have to help them understand their own time management and look at that. And then this also comes into self-control. Do they have the ability to think things through? Well, if you can't imagine how long an assignment takes, you're not really going to be able to think it through. Can they slow down? Some of them are rushing through all this stuff just to get it done, right? So that's Samantha. So let's say, if we have Samantha at home, how are we going to help her? Refuel. Seems so basic to say, oh, have a snack and rest and, come home. But if you imagine that all day you're trying to focus in school and start all these tasks, and that's not the easiest thing for you, when you get home, if you then have to, in their mind, continue this long day of doing things, it's unsustainable. You can't drive the same speed all the time. They need to take a break. I find this really difficult for parents because I want to check it off my list. I want to know that, got your homework done. So come on, what are we doing? Let's start. But they really do need a break. And when I say break, I don't mean eat while you're doing your math homework. I mean a clean break, something totally different. Walk the dog. Most of them are looking at YouTube. That frustrates us, but it is a full break of doing something else. Feed them, always a good idea. But give them a chance to sort of recharge. Initiate, yeah.
So that recharging.
Yeah.
So for example, my son struggles with all this, and right now he's in a play.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, okay, he just got home at 6:15, and he has homework, but it's something he loves to do.
Mm-hmm.
Can that be considered part of his break if he's not doing homework there?
Yes,
Is that-
I mean, that's a
break
scheduling.
from taking out papers and.
Yeah. Well, it's a scheduling issue too. We have to live in reality, right? We don't want them to go to bed late. But that is a break. I mean, doing soccer or doing a play is something totally different. So I would say that would be a good break from everything. What I see a lot of is kids who do not know how to actually take a break. So for instance, I had one student in high school and I said, so what are you doing to take a break? And she said, oh, I'm watching YouTube. I said, okay, that's fine, I'm taking a break. I go, so how are you feeling when you're watching YouTube? She goes, I'm totally stressed out because all I can think about is all the homework I have to do. I'm like, okay, well that's not really a break. So if that's the case, then start the homework. I'll get more into this, but you have to find where they need their break and what kind of break that is. But I would say what I would try to avoid is this sort of carryover, do a snack, do your homework, take a little break and keep going. I think they need some really distinct changes in their afternoon and evenings. I hope if that didn't answer, we can get
No,
back
it
to that.
did.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, I didn't even mean to be rude. He's asking me what his next task is. It's like as you and I are talking,
Mhm.
he's checking in with me about
Asking
what
what to
he's
do.
getting to do now. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll tell them tomorrow you'll have a better answer for
I know
them.
the better answer. But no,
So-
I'm glad to hear that because that made me concerned because he does need a break. But like getting home at 6:15 for
late.
a 12-year-old.
Yeah, they've got
It's
schedules,
late.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean more from going to school, going to X period, starting your homework at 3:15. That, for some kids, that is just not, they just need a little bit of something different. So when we're talking about helping them with getting back in this after the break, right? This initiation really comes from how are they organized, right? So we've got planners up here, and we're going to talk about agendas and all this stuff, and they all sound great. I don't really care. Jean doesn't really care. I don't care if you use a piece of paper, an agenda, a computer. Just some form of organizing has to be implemented. There's always a step to me that gets missed before the writing down, and it really is getting their brains warmed up and ready to go. And how can you help them with that? So conversation is a great idea. Talk it out with them. What do you have? What's tonight look like? What's going to be? Oh, an English essay? Oh, when's that due? How's that going to look? There's a nuance here that can't be, when's your homework, how do you have to get it done? More of an interest, like, tell me. Because what they're doing as they're telling you is they're thinking it through and planning it in their minds. And they're also remembering like some things that they forgot. But talking it out loud, dictating to you often helps if they're talking and they can't write at the same time. Our kids do this with me all the time. Okay, tell me what you're worried about. What do we got? We got a big science test. What do you want to work out? And they'll talk to me and I'll write down what they need to do. And then you can hand that back to them. They can even dictate in their phone if you want. Just some form of brainstorming. And I see this as the warm-up before doing something. As far as time management, I think a timer is awesome. You can use it on your phone. You can get the old-fashioned kind. But the reason, and Jean and I talk about this a lot, this time versus tasks, right? So some students really can sit down for a block of time and plow through things. And others, if you try to interrupt that the English, they have to finish the English. So as an example, time is, I'm going to sit down for a block of 40 minutes, work, no distractions, see where I am and take a break then. For other people, no. I need to get my science out of the way first, then my English. So that's a task versus time. And these are conversations you have with them to give them some input. What do you think is going to work for you? I say to students all the time, hey, let's experiment with this. Go home for a week and try it this way. Come back, we'll try it this way. You have to give them some say in this. Anybody who thinks you can just place a system on them, it never sticks, ever. So, okay, so that's Samantha. Now we got Peter. Okay, so here's Peter. He comes in the door, like flies his, backpack across the room, sits down and starts working furiously. I've got to get this done, Going through his assignments. And then in the middle of it, he's like, oh my God, I actually don't know what I'm writing about. Or I've spent so much time on my science homework, I don't have time for the rest of the night, and I can't get my things done. And this build, as Jean was referring to, happens, and it's a complete sort of meltdown. So what's going on with him, okay, is this idea of cognitive flexibility. Basically, all that means is that they have trouble thinking differently. They have trouble thinking about what tonight is versus last night, what this assignment is versus another assignment, what takes longer, what takes shorter. It's really hard for them to think outside of these parameters, and they have really hard time, sorry this is not smaller, looking at different viewpoints and switching gears. Okay?
Maybe now's the time.
Does everyone have enough time and flexibility to take
Yeah,
down?
no, that.
Maybe then fix this. We don't think.
And this word tonight, again, organization. So this kind of kid usually doesn't organize at all. He just like jumps in and starts doing all his work and doesn't plan. So that's a big problem. No, yeah. You could understand me, right? Put this together. Oh, that's nice. Thanks. All right. Sequencing of steps is another problem. Like we talked about a little bit. Doesn't know how to go from one, sort of one task to another. And this is a different kind of focus. This isn't necessarily, this is a little bit what you're talking about. It's not necessarily a trouble focusing. It's almost a fixation on what they're doing, and they can't break away. Okay. I've got to finish this right now, or I have to, and they can't break for anything, and it's really, really hard. The reason it's hard is because they're having a hard time getting back into it. So it's this idea that they fixate on a task, and it's really hard for them to press pause. This then flows over into their stamina, right? If they're working really intensely for a long time, they don't know when to press pause, and so then what is going to happen? They're going to collapse or they're going to implode. Most of what I see, not to be girl boy, the girls get wound up and flip out, and the boys get wound down and give up. Tends to happen from what I see. And all of that is because of self-regulation, right? They don't know, and we have to help them. We're going to get to that. How to push through. Sometimes they give up too easily, or when to pause and say, whoa, I need to stop here. All right? So what do we do with Peter's home? How can we help him? So we keep talking about organization. I went over sort of how to brainstorming, outline, planning, and we can talk about that in more detail if you want suggestions. But the overall idea is that they have to organize in some way. I have some students who don't ever take out their planner, and I said, forget it, I don't care about your planner. Use a sheet of paper every day and write down a piece of paper. I have people who have, white kids have whiteboards in their room, on their door, wherever it is. I don't care. I just want them to have that sense that they are thinking. And it's not about a to-do list, okay? This is helping them plan. That's the difference here. It's not, I need to do this. In writing, in organizing, they're teaching themselves how to plan. Which of course is about time management, right? So we need to help them think overall. And that's where the conversation comes in with you or somebody else. By the way, teachers will do this at home, right? Not at home, sorry, after school. Go find them. Teachers are really, really willing, for the most part, really willing to help. And if you find one that they really like, he can help with other classes, and just it's really just helpful for them. So it doesn't always have to be you, is my point. All right? So the idea of the week, the night, your schedule, all of these things are really, really important to get them to think about. And it's hard. If we're looking at middle school, we sort of jump into this, right? Through elementary school, we're kind of taking them, the teachers are helping them, and then all of a sudden middle school, they're sort of getting delivered and they're supposed to figure out their schedule. So think about how you can help them. Think about having that conversation, having them plan, doing it with, I with a couple of my kids, I'm like, you know what, until you can prove it, 5 minutes a day, you and I are talking and writing down, and to bed, right? And once, they're like, please get away from me. I'll get away from you when I see that you're actually doing this. I can't be quite so mean to my students as I can. So focus is a big one here. Think about where they're studying. Are they in their room, which sounds great, except there are a lot of distractions there and you might not see them. Are they at the kitchen table where the dog's running around and you're cooking dinner? Just think about it. And the reason I say think is that some kids can work in that kitchen with the dog running around and others can't. So again, this is not a one-way situation. You have to figure out what works best for them. So I usually do this experiment. Say, we're going to try doing work here for a week, and then you're going to come back and report to me. You're going to try doing it here. And the whole idea of when I talk to them is we're working more efficiently, which in their brain means more quickly. So if you give that trade-off, they're usually willing to experiment. They're also more willing if you give them a say in everything. This is just a little example of what you can do about helping with the focus. Put the agenda in front of them, put a prompt if they're writing an essay in front of them, put the history questions if they're doing social studies in front of them. Whatever reminder it is, put it in front of them so they don't have to hold that information and remember. If you have a copier at home, lots of times I like printing out, a lot of stuff is online now, print out at least the questions of what they're supposed to answer, if not the whole, I know it's a lot to print, but print out something. And for a lot of students, I say, I don't care what you're doing, you have a piece of paper in front of the computer, in front of you no matter what you're doing, and you have to jot down some things. It helps them, it helps bring them back, and it helps them focus. And again, this is where we're going to build a stamina. Are you going to do bursts of time, or are you going to do a task and experiment with that? Some kids don't have more than 20 minutes in them.
I know, like my son, I don't think, even though he's 12, doesn't have a concept of time.
Yeah, they
We had to get an hourglass, which is like 15 minutes, or set a Google timer.
Yeah.
And like he flips it, and just to give him a sense of what kind of
They
time
have
is
no
passing.
idea.
Really.
Yeah.
So it's like,
You could say like a YouTube video, put it in their words, but most kids that age really don't have a concept of time. So it's good to get that, get the old-fashioned timer. I use the timer on my phone all the time. You may not want to enter the phone into this situation, but if they can, distinguish between
but
that
then
and
it's a thing, so that's why I was just curious if it was just him or if that's
No,
kind of a.
no, I right, Jane, what you say?
Yeah, and I want that, as Kathleen's talking, it's all coming back to that touchstone of that metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking, right? So I have a high school senior I just saw on Tuesday, and I said to her, what's your sense? So she has an English essay, she has this other, all these things. How long does it take you? She said, I don't know, right? She's leaving for college in a year, right? No functioning clue of how long an activity. I said, so then here's what you're doing. So it's not a game, right? It's sort of, all right, buddy, so what do you think? How long, over under on the math assignment, over under on the questions on the book you guys are reading for English class. What do we think? And let's see how close you are. So go do them, let's start. Tell me when you're done and we'll see how you did. because then he can start to build a working framework. Oh, okay, so I read that chapter and then answered the questions, and that ended up taking me 35 minutes. So he'll start to build a little scaffolding of knowing. Yeah. So that then they can start to project, like, okay, well, I know that that usually takes me 30 minutes, so I'll do that first when I get home from the play, because I can like bang that out. But they really don't know, right? So remember, that conductor with all those pieces is not there, helping them understand.
I think also, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to ask, I don't know if this is too early to ask this, or if it is going to come up. This all makes sense. As a parent and a teacher, this all makes sense. But as from my experience, and also from what I've heard from friends and parents, they're not home always to monitor so closely. So the goal is for the kids to be independent, and which I hear a lot, oh, I forgot, I just don't know, and charts stress me out and everything. So the self-regulation part is something that I am really focusing on. About, let's, you have that urge to eat, you're gonna eat. That type of, I gotta get my homework done.
Right, and if you're not there, it's even more challenging. So personally, I'm not there a lot, but, I will have a 5-minute conversation on the phone. Or we'll sit down and make a plan for the week, right? I mean, we could talk about the distractions a lot, and we might get to that after. It's literally a whole nother thing to address. But what I would say is, I always challenge them. Why don't you try doing your homework with no phone in the room, with no distractions, and make it like a game for a lot of middle schoolers, and let me know. Let me know. If you're doing more than 20 minutes on that math sheet, I'm going to give you a Jolly Rancher or whatever. It's an interesting conversation to have with a middle schooler, because what I find in middle school is that they don't even know the difference anymore of having their phone and not having their phone. Whereas some of the high schoolers actually don't have, I feel like they have their phone less. With the high schoolers, I will just point out always, and for both of them, but for high school this seems to work more, you do want some of your night back, right? You do want to not sit here with me, your mom, yourself, doing this work all the time. So what's the harm in trying it a different way? Come back and tell me it's not working. We'll figure it out. But I guarantee you, if you can sit for 30 minutes and do work with no distractions, you're going to finish it more quickly. And probably better. It's going to be a better product, I would say. So there's another student, and I'm going to cover some of what you're saying too, because I want to get to Eliza. But the idea of these things when you're not home is definitely more challenging, but I would argue that you can sit down on a weekend or, kind of make a family plan. All right, Eliza. It's the only name I didn't place. It's my daughter, who happily is now at college. Not that I don't miss her, but the point is she's there, and she's there. So, top of the stairs, wherever you are, have no idea. They're like frozen in time and looking at things like they have no idea what they're doing there. And they're, if they're younger, they're like getting distracted and trying to play with something. If they're older, they get on their phone. The idea is that they're probably headed upstairs to do something that you told them to do or that they needed to do. In this case, lots of times, you have the book upstairs that you had to read for the night before, but now you need it in your backpack and you're trying to remember to go get it. And you're standing up there and you really have no idea. This kind of student is the same one who often forgets stuff, misplaces a phone, forgets the book, and seems to be checked out. And I want to stress seems to be checked out because they're not actually checked out. They're working really, really, really hard to remember. It's really, really challenging. So this brings us to working memory. Working memory is just the inability or the challenge to hold information. They might have been the ones when you were when they were really little, that you said go upstairs, brush your teeth, and put your pajamas on, and they were, up there asking you what they're doing. They really have a challenge with this. So I want to stress, first of all, that I know they seem checked out, but they really are not checked out. So think about it differently, think about them differently. And this comes into task completion, right? They're doing something, and in the middle, they've totally lost what they were supposed to be doing. Organization, they can't keep track of things. Sequencing, they have a really hard time following steps. And this I'll touch on in school, where this is really tricky is a teacher is like, da 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 da, and, you know, they're halfway through the science lab, and like, well, I don't know what else I was supposed to be doing. So it shows up a lot of different places, and that can be really frustrating for them in school. So when Eliza gets home, what do we do with her? Thanks, Lisa. What Jean touched on, they don't like change, right? The reason they like routine and the reason they like things not, you know, they have trouble with transition is that they figured out a way to make this work for them, which is to keep things as similar as possible for them as far as schedule and all of that, because that helps them remember what they can remember. A lot of this student will say is overly emotional. Oh, she's so emotional, she's getting all worked up and all that kind of stuff. I would stress that that is in our view and not hers. The reason she's getting so emotional is that she's so frustrated. So frustrating. Imagine having people talk at you all day long when you were trying to remember. And if they're giving you 10 things, you can remember 3. And it's not because you're stupid. It's because you literally have a sponge that is saturated and you cannot take in any more of that information. It's exhausting. So what do we do about it? Again, this organization, lists, charts. For this kind of student, visuals are really helpful. I used to send my daughter up the stairs with like a little picture that was like teeth, bed, pajama. And then as she got older, we wrote them down. We had lists on the refrigerator, we had lists on her door. I mean, the more visuals you can give her, the better. And again, if that's sort of lower middle school, through middle school, encourage them to do it on their own. You know, pull that away. We don't want to be making lists for them as they're going off to college. How can you work on this idea generation, word generation? And we see these kids who can't come up with a word. These are the ones that, if I could do one thing in school, it would say, please don't call on kids until everybody gets 20 to 30 seconds. Pause, think of the idea, then everybody can raise their hand. So for these kids, it's really difficult to pull that information. How can you help with that? Repeating, talking out loud is one of the best ways to strengthen. It's like a muscle. Have them talk out loud to you. So we talked about planning, but also if they're working through a paper or a test, have them, if you have time, and believe me, I have kids who I may talk to themselves, just talking out loud, repeating back what's needed, talking back in terms on anything. Speaking out loud is a huge help. It's also a great way to edit papers. Make them read out loud because then they catch their mistakes. Yeah.
Is this distinct from receptive and expressive languaging processing issues?
Yes. A short answer, right?
Mhm.
Is it distinct from receptive? So that is a learn. Do you wanna? I would say that's a learning more
And
of a
how can we
learning.
distinguish?
Yeah. All right, let me get through this list because I have some really important things to say about that because I've lived with this child for a long time. So the organization, the whole reason we do that is to keep the routine, right? How do you do this without micromanaging, also, or without being around? As they get old, like have them make the list later on. You start off making the list and then hand it over. You can share calendars. Those are a really good way to keep everybody connected. Oh yeah, you knew that I was tutoring tonight at 7 o'clock. Or you have that game or whatever. And then everybody's on the same page, okay? Put up the home calendar, whatever you want to do. But just make it so that they can check back in, right? So when they've forgotten and they're sitting there like, what am I supposed to be doing? They have something to look to. Oh, this is my list. Or, oh, where's mom tonight? Oh, this is my calendar. Just help them find that information. And how does this happen with self-monitoring? So I think I've said it before, we have to give them some say. You have to involve them in how they make these decisions. Again, if you put a system on them, it's not going to stick, maybe for a year. And a really good example of this is that I have a lot of parents who say he has to come home and start his homework right away. So let's just say he has a little bit of time and there's some choice in the matter about his schedule, that he could take a break or not take a break. If you say, what's going to work for you, either or. Do you want to come home and start at 4 after a small break, or do you want to get started right away? Just understand the difference in giving him a little bit of say and a little bit of choice, as opposed to, I went to this great talk, this is what you're going to do, we're going to start at 4 o'clock. And then you're like, you know what? It just takes all the autonomy away from them, and it really doesn't help their self-esteem either. So I think a lot of these conversations, if we're talking about middle and upper school, and even lower third and fourth grade, can be a conversation as a family, as a parent and student. How about this idea? And the idea is, I noticed you were struggling. I want to help you. What if we tried studying this way? What if we started homework here? What if we did it here instead of here? Like, bring up those conversations. Yeah.
My son was saying to me before that he likes to read the day before it's due because he forgets if he reads 2 days before it's due, which is kind of a problem either way. Do you think he reads out loud though? Because
I
sometimes
think-
I'll sit and read with him out loud, and I think he remembers more if we're reading together out loud. But he's also 12
So,
in 7th grade.
as far as reading, here's what I would say about that. First of all, I'm not saying audible on its own. Like, you don't just listen to a story, but I do think listening and reading at the same time is very helpful for a lot of these kids. It helps to hear it and see it. The other thing is, and this can be challenging when we don't own books and we can't write in them and things like that, but if you can break up the book, let's say there's small chapters or bigger chapters, every chapter, or if they're, if anyone's doing 7th grade is doing this fever book, the chapters are super small, then you do 3 or 4 together. But you take a break after those 3 or 4, and I get those big stickies, and you write a few bullet points of what was important. Okay, it's great for summer reading too when they read in June and they have no idea what they're doing in September. The idea is you want to give them a place to park some information so they can access it later. Okay, so that one, I think that's one of my favorites because you can use it whether or not you own the book. I'm not a big fan of the highlighting and overdoing because I think it takes the joy out of reading, and also you're looking for details, and what you really want to be thinking about when you're reading is overall themes. What's the main idea? Why is this important to the story? Summary, not what happened and that sort of thing. So it helps them also take away like a bigger picture, which is really good later on for reading comprehension. We tend to go for all the detail when we're younger, and later on in school we're really being asked for larger themes. Any AP World people out there? That's going on this year. Okay, so that brings us to everything, but do you want to address, I want to make sure we get to that question about
Go ahead,
self. No, you can.
if you have something to say about that.
I'm having trouble with my working memory.
The expressive and receptive and expressive language.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're asking about?
So I think that falls into the category of what I was saying, that it can become really hard to distinguish what's what. And this may not be the best approach, but I sort of am someone who says, okay, if we think that is a thing that is going on, how do we address it? No matter what umbrella it falls under. So like my son who has dyslexia, working memory, which I always describe as like a box here that eventually dumps into your long-term memory. But kids who have dyslexia don't have great working memory. Well, kids who have executive function don't have a great working memory. Which umbrella is that under for my son? I don't know, except he doesn't have a good working memory. So we need to work on that. It's flashcards. I get it, if you hate them, it doesn't matter. That's kind of what you need to do, buddy, right? Is that's the only way that's gonna get it in there. So how is that showing up for your child? That's what you need to kind of look at and how to intervene.
I think as far as addressing expressive, like helping them, again, I keep saying this, but talking out loud, like having them practice a little bit is really, really helpful. And as far as receptive, having them take it in, I wish, it's hard, right? More visual. We really want to find what that sweet spot is, so he's not just being given the information, like maybe he's looking at it and seeing it. And I would say if there's a specific class that he's struggling with, to look at it, because often it might be too much lecturing and not enough support, although I think that we're doing some really great things in changing that in the school system. But you could say to the teacher, he's having trouble with that. Is there a way to get most of them are posting on Google Classroom, but just ask them maybe in class. So one thing that I wish all teachers would do, for instance, is give their notes, of their slides or whatever they're talking about, so you can actually look at it. A lot of science teachers do this, right? They give it and you fill it in. That's really, really helpful. And if teachers don't do that, then I always say to students, you gotta have that piece of paper in front of you. You've got to have somewhere to park that information. You cannot sit there for 40 minutes and listen and not do some kind of note taking. All right? Yes.
Prior.
Give them a day ahead.
Prior.
Yeah. Prior.
Prior would be ideal.
So they go in saying, oh, today we're gonna be learning about, it's helpful. All right, do you want to bring it on?
So terminology, hurdles, we're on to implications, the implications of kind of how executive function impacts our kids. So that is my son Will, a very long time ago now. He's going to graduate in May as a student who studied music education. He wants to be a high school music teacher, trumpet being his primary instrument. But poor executive skills make the kid feel like they're stupid because they can't remember things. Like I said, his trumpet was his most important possession in high school, and he would forget it on Friday after jazz band. Meanwhile, there was a game that night for marching band, and he would forget it at school. So when I run into either teachers or parents who say to me, but if Will really cared about his trumpet, he'd bring it. And I'm like, no, trust me, he really cares about that trumpet. It is his favorite thing, okay? And then we can tend to see them as that sort of like lazy, why aren't they getting started on that, what's going on? I was thinking the whole time Kathleen was talking about kind of the steps, go upstairs, brush your teeth, put on your pajamas. That shows up in the writing too, where I brush the pajamas and put on my teeth kind of thing. Like the thoughts are all there that are great, they're just not really organized for that student. Okay, good. So what do we need to do? I hope you all were doing a little bit of that thought of kind of what is bubbling up for my particular child and where is it showing up? How do we need to intervene? I have a couple thoughts that I wanted to share as well as we were talking. Just want to take one and pass it around. So just like a show of hands, how many of you use your phone as your primary calendar and organizer for your personal or professional life? How many of you use a physical calendar to organize your personal or professional life? Okay. Those of you who use your phone, if I handed this to you and said you now have to use this, would you be happy? If you use your phone. Yeah, right? Yeah, no. Okay. I don't know about here, but when my kids went through the school system in Madison, in 5th grade, they gave them planners and thought, yay, what a school system we are. Okay. But I want you to think about how you just felt if I said you have to use this. This is how you have to organize your life. So my son Will came home, and there are teachers in the room. I'm not bashing teachers. Understand it's my kid coming into this as well, right? So the teacher said, write down in your planner on Monday, outline for history is due. Will comes walking in the door Monday, crying. I got a 0. The outline was due today, Mom. And I said, well, what happened, buddy? I don't know, Mom. The teacher said to put it down on Monday. There was no conversation of when would it make sense for you to write it down. And for my son, it would have made sense to write it down at least on Friday, if not also on Thursday. Right? So here's a planner, well-intended, no conversation about how to use that as a tool. Right? So that's some of what I sit and do with kids all the time. And I actually took him at one point, and we went to Staples, and I said, open it up and look at it, yes or no? Open it up and look at it, yes or no? How big, how small, lines, no lines, boxes, no boxes. They're all different. It becomes a very different shopping spree, okay? My new one just came. I order the same one every year. Hard copy. My husband's like, use your phone. Nope, hate it. Can't stand it. Can't see everything I need that's in there. So that becomes a little activity in terms of how do you want to intervene. Start to have those thoughtful conversations with your kids. Why do you like this? Do you not like it like this? I just handed you a couple pages from a U.S. history textbook, okay? Now, the other thing we didn't talk about is how much is homework online in Final Site, Power School, whatever it is that you guys are using down here. It's all online now? Okay. That is discouraging the use of the planner. Guess what they need when they go to college? A planner. Okay? So kids are kind of learning, well, the homework's just up on there, so I'll check that. We're absolutely handicapping how to do any long-term paper or project. How to start, I have no idea, because I just go on there, it tells me these pages for Chem, these pages for APUSH, I get those done, I go in the next day. There is no integration of like what's due when and looking at that, okay? Second thing, textbooks are moving online. How many of you love your Kindle or e-reader? Just to be clear, that was going to put publishing out of business. I don't know if you guys have been to Madison. We have the most amazing bookstore in our town, probably in the state, R.J. Julia Booksellers. And the owner was actually asking townspeople when that was happening how she could stay current. Still in business, thank goodness. Okay? I can't do it. I tried. I need a physical book. Understand your kids are having to use e-textbooks more and more. Okay? I had a student who had to have the e-textbook up, and the teacher in high school insisted that she outline. So that's one tab up and open, and now another tab up and open trying to outline. I do not have executive function. I hated helping her with it. It was making me crazy trying to go tab to tab, and where did we leave off? I don't have trouble tracking where we were in the paragraph. I can't find it. So this is just a sample of some textbook pages from a history textbook, and there are a couple choices of how to take notes. The first one, I tried to be good about kind of like not using 20 pages. The first one is called two-column or Cornell note-taking. I wish I knew about it in college and graduate school because it is really streamlined. Actually, I don't know if there are any other steals for 1 second. So key information goes on the left column, details, definition go on the right-hand column. You can cover one side in self-study. You can cover the other side in self-study. Okay?
For Rye, a lot of you will recognize this because they're using this in school. The teachers are giving them the Cornell drills.
Sometimes I'll make flashcards, is that okay?
Yep.
From this, because like this is what I
Absolutely.
have, but I could just see them.
Yes, correct. So your vocab terms could be here, right? Or your, Teddy Roosevelt, whatever it is here in this column, right? Outlining is on the next page. That works for my oldest and only my oldest. My oldest is a verbal learner. Language is easy for him. It's not most people. School became a wider event because of the invention of the printing press. That's it. All around words and language. So if you are not that kind of learner, it wasn't necessarily always easy. And then the last page is kind of more that graphic learner. Boxes, images, right? I had a student in AP US History, she was super creative. She kept trying to put the square peg in the round hole and do notes like her older sister outlining. I said, cut it out, we're done. I said, you're gonna make a poster. Make a big, huge poster. Get your colored pens out, let's go. Arrows, how do things connect? What were the implications? And that was a much happier space for her. So start thinking about those things too for your kid, because as they go through, that will decrease some of that emotional stress that they're having. How about we help them even kind of get in a lane of learning that works for them, okay? I brought just kind of as a prop, I know Kathleen, you were saying this has been used around. I don't know if any of you have heard of a Rocket Book, okay? I am not a proponent of typing notes, which the kids get really nudgy at me about, but there have been studies that handwriting actually helps with learning and retention. What? Yeah, yeah, yeah. They kind of
They're taking them out. They're out of a lot of colleges. They're saying no more. You have to can't bring no more taping.
Yeah.
Well, it's also really distracting. But the idea of writing and helping your memory and organization, there's a lot of studies on that.
What was that called again?
A Rocket Book. So this is the compromise. My son is actually teaching in a high school in Massachusetts, math, and he's using it a ton. He'll do sample problems. So it comes with a pen. It's reusable, so it's super green. Just saying. So you take your notes on it, and there's a barcode, which would then upload it into your computer according to the category you've identified here. So, Rocket Book. And, let me be clear, the price point is pretty amazing. It's not bad. It's like $30, I think, for one.
Do you have to have the pen,
So
you
the-
have to tape, or is it, no, you're just doing the handwriting yourself?
So there is
There's
a
nothing
pen
with
that comes with it, and you
that.
then,
You handwrite it and.
yep, you can write it, and then you scan the barcode, and you've already identified, like sorry, you guys can't see it, but these little shapes are down here on the bottom, so you mark one off, and it'll upload it into like AP US History notes, AP Physics notes.
So there's a pen that goes with it.
Yep,
And it's not a recording pen? you
no,
don't talk
it
about
is
that.
not a recording pen,
not-
this is you taking your
These are
notes,
taking place of that.
and then you wipe it off with water, and use it again.
It's awesome.
fascinated, but I hate it, so fascinated.
And not for nothing, so my kid who, right, so this could be your history page, this could be your math, this could be your science, there's several pages in here, so my kid who like the notebook was on the bed, because everyone, you know, science is, Spanish wants a 2-section notebook, math wants a this one, it's like, okay, really, these kids, you can't organize one notebook and you want them to have 12 for each different class, so that's just a really lovely tool that I like. Okay. Okay, and one more time. So hopefully you can see kind of these pieces. I just want to bring it back again to kind of the different categories and the planning, the metacognition, thinking about it, the working memory, kind of the behavior pieces that all come together to work for your kid in terms of the executive functions.
Okay, so we're gonna open it out if somebody has to leave.
You want to go back?
Yeah.
One
Can you go back?
thing I'm gonna ask is if you haven't signed up on Rye Youth Council's page for
Thanks.
tonight, please do, because if you want some hard copies of this and things sent to you, I will do that. So if you haven't signed up, you can do that. And yeah, I think now, I know we did pretty well in an hour, but we would love to stick around if you guys have time and have questions, okay?
Besides school, my daughter's room is a complete mess. Can't walk. So I assume there's one of the How do I help her? Because we, you know, for months and years it's like that. She knows where to find her stuff, but it's a complete mess.
Well, that's the question. She knows where to find her stuff.
I know, but no,
It bothers
can't work
you
like
or,
that.
yeah.
How do I help her to start, you know? And she, of course, like that's one of the task initiation things. It's like
Right.
the task is so humongous.
So timer, yeah, and again, I'm like,
Shove everything into bed.
but a timer or this whole idea of timer task is really interesting. Hey, can you do a drawer today and a drawer tomorrow? Do you want to do the whole room? Can you do it for 20 minutes? You know, sometimes the problem is, and this goes into their lives in general, if it feels too overwhelming, they just won't do it.
Right.
All right? So I would suggest getting in small, everything about information from cleaning a room to, you know, learning science terms. Small chunks, right? We want to break these things down that are manageable for them. Because what happens with a lot of kids, well, a lot of kids have messy rooms, they might not all have executive functioning, but the idea that it is so overwhelming to them that they just check out. Yeah, so I would break it down.
How do you help kids think through, kids that don't necessarily have specific problems, but just think through what I need when, so that you get to the cross practice with the stick and the bag, and not just the bag. Or, you know, you have a Spanish quiz on Monday and it's Friday, but I'm not really thinking about Monday, so I didn't bring home my Spanish book.
I love that. I don't have any homework. Well, no,
Right.
I actually do. You don't have it right now, but you have it.
How do you help them think through, well, here's what I need for these different activities,
Right.
and I need to get to whatever it is with all of my stuff?
So everybody's different, as they'll say. So I'm going to give you an example of like my daughter who really had trouble planning things and then would freak us out if we were there and it wasn't, if she didn't have anything. She could not think off the cuff. This had to be planned ahead. We had to have routine. So we had lists, like you're going to dance class, this is what you need. And again, when they're young, you make the list together and you check it off together. And then as they get older, through middle school and high school, here's your list. Check it yourself. I'm not checking your lacrosse bag. And then later on, it should be, do you have everything you need for lacrosse? You know, that kind of thing where you sort of wean them away. But I think visuals are really important. Checklists are really important. But lots of times, I find we got to back up a step where you have that list, but how do you get to the list to begin with? And that's where I keep coming up with this talking out loud and brainstorming. What do you need? What do you need for the homework tonight? What do you need for sports? Whatever it is. Because what we don't want to do is tell them this is what you need. Because if we do that, you're going to be doing that through college. We want to have them figure it out and talk it out and work that muscle of thinking, what do I need to do? What are the steps I want to take? I always say one of the things that I think is really challenging in you know this town, a lot of towns we are, is that we do rescue them a lot. We do drive their homework to school. We do give them their little snack. Like, you know, it's okay. I would suggest not driving the work to school for the most part. I have a highly anxious daughter and I'm women at work, so we do have to deal with that sometimes. But we are often giving it all to them and then expecting them to go off to college and be able to do it all. So this is about doing some of these steps with them and then slowly kind of extricating yourself from it. Yeah.
I was wondering, do you, what I struggle with is my two children, I've got a 9th grade boy and a 6th grade girl, personality-wise, they're very different from me. I'm ultra organised, you know, because that's what it was in my job and things, and just a lot of what you're saying tonight about, like, my son said, oh, Mummy, can I listen to a book? No, you can't do that, Mrs. Neeson. You know, that's not the right way. I found it really interesting you were saying, you know, it is, you can do that, and one of them, their room's an absolute mess, and, you know, when do I intervene and everything. Is there a book that you recommend that goes a little bit more into the different personality types that I can sort of understand?
Who they are.
Yeah.
And again, as Jean said, and you were asking, it's really hard to distinguish between what's just executive functioning and then what gets into learning styles, right? So these could be totally different learning styles as well, and that can, figuring that out can be difficult. One of the examples I would give is a period. Everybody thinks that this is the time between 2:30 and 3 where you can go find a teacher, which I'm a proponent for. I think it's a great idea, but there are some kids that it's really stressful. You go into a class and you don't understand the math, so now I'm supposed to find that teacher and ask them for clarification. The room is crowded, I'm embarrassed, I don't really know what I'm asking. Like, all of that is just this, like, really stressful situation. So what I say is, maybe not, maybe come home. Maybe just come home at 2:30, and I'm only saying this to you because if I said it to your kids, they'd be like, hey, we don't have to go to the extras. It definitely works for some students. It absolutely does. And I think what Jean and I are both trying to say is, like, you really have to get into their heads a little bit and understand that it's different for each one of them. And so one might do really well with X period and the other might not, right? So just sort of start thinking a little bit differently. I think that is really important around the planning too. Yeah.
During the exam, the kids always don't know how to manage. Like, if the teacher gives them 10 questions, they always answer 8 and they rank. So how do you teach the kids to the exam, time allocation?
To actually take the exam.
No, like when you
To get through it?
Yeah, you can't finish the question. You're always missing the last couple because you ran out of time.
Yeah. Well, that's an awareness, right? Would you want to address that one?
Ooh.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, is it across curriculum? Is it math? Is it a history class where they have to
social
write?
study.
Yeah. So my guess is that could be a couple things. A lot of times in history tests, what show up are questions like, what were the advantages of the North during the Civil War and how did they manifest as advantages? So 2 questions embedded in 1 question. So those become the things that kids are then struggling to answer both parts of that, and then 9 and 10 questions don't get answered. And if it is that sort of short answer, it's organizing those thoughts. Or the task initiation, like I have to start this essay, where do I start, how do I get going? So some of that is really targeted intervention in terms of brain dumps before they start to write. So kind of just some keywords to get going, but it might be strategies to look at for them, and it could be something else. I would start to pay attention. Is it just that history class, and having those conversations with your child about what do you think is happening, because then it feeds into anxiety of not finishing. So now the horse is way out of the barn, right? So now before this test even starts, the kid is already thinking, I'm not going to finish, right? And what we know is anxiety and problem solving are located in the same part of the brain. So if anxiety is up, problem solving is down. So then we're not really going to be able to finish at all. But that's why I asked, is it social studies, is it math? And it sounds like it's more of those kind of elaborating, analysis, connecting questions that are getting really stuck. One of the things that I wanted to say when we were talking about either picking up a room or whatever it is, process goals and outcome goals. Make sure you dialogue with your kids about that. I had a student at Sacred Heart High School in Hamden. She took down all these notes for a history class, copied them all. It was sort of a mom thing too, where mom was like, hey, those can't just be the questions, you need to write down everything. So she went and wrote down everything and got like a 65 on the test. And the teacher came in when I was there working with her in the little crocodile tears form. Teacher leaves and I said, time out. I said, do not beat yourself up. We need to stop right now. Your process and your effort was awesome. You didn't get the outcome we wanted. metacognition, let's get back into this. Why didn't it work? What happened? What do you need to do differently? So it's not just that outcome, because we've sort of become really focused on that piece and not the process, right? So that's where it feels really debilitating, like I didn't get that grade, I didn't do that, I didn't finish the test. Okay, but time out, like why? And did you get a 9 out of 10 on all of those short answers, but you're just not getting to those other ones? What's happening? Is it hard to write that? Look at that process piece. That will help them get to that outcome piece.
A lot of students will look at a math test and say, oh, I did terribly. And
Or they flip pages.
And I'll say to them, like, let's look at the patterns here. Did you get the same kind of problem wrong over and over again? Or was there a concept that you didn't get? Did you run out of time? So look, you have to invite them, especially the older students. You have to look at your performance and judge what happened. If I ran out of time, that's a whole other thing to work on. If I got the same math concept wrong over and over again, then I need to go back and understand that math concept. And the other thing I'll say just quickly about brain dumping, which I love, is a lot of kids, we talk about anxiety and all this sort of stuff, and they get really worked up for a test. This whole idea, I always say, just go in and write down math, write down your formulas. Or if it's a social studies, write down a quick timeline. If it's English, write down the books and the characters. Like have them do a little brainstorming before they even start to take the test, because what that does is it allows them to park information and breathe and be like, oh, I know stuff, you know? And when they're feeling more stressed as the test goes on, they can go back and say, whoa, I remember that timeline, I remember that formula, I don't need to work too hard to get to it now. So it really offsets some of that stress, anxiety that they have in taking tests.
Here's a question on
Yeah.
that. So one of my son's teachers, a math teacher, told him that he should keep a little bit of a log of the mistakes he constantly sends to me, and to like go back and say, okay, before I hand in my homework, did I do any of these mistakes? Is that kind of like the same thing?
It's
Instead
very
of
much
not
like
like a
that.
negative spin on it? It's okay.
No, it's looking at what you're making, where are your mistakes, how do we learn from them? I mean, I have students in high school who get these math review packets, and I don't know if you've seen them, but they've got a lot, they're really, really big. And you know what, you don't have to do every one. You can do, so I'll say to students, do the odds. Go through your math review packet and do all the odd problems. Okay, what did you have trouble with? Now go back and do the additional evens. But we don't have to do every single one, right? We can go back and then use the ones that we didn't do well and do those. The testing is difficult for me because we don't always get to bring the tests home. And so sometimes that assessment is really quick in school where they have 5 minutes of looking at the math test. So it does take some conversation with them to look. Yeah.
Don't you think that's a huge challenge? I mean, it's ridiculous. My daughters took the same test last week and did terrible. And the first thing that we did was email the teacher and say, can you help us out here? We'd love to see what happened and what went wrong. Well, she's here right now, we're working on it. Okay, great, and we'll give it back to you when we're finished. Okay, well, it's a week later, they're on to a different subject, we have no test, and it's over.
Yeah.
But it's constant.
Yeah, I know this is where I walk the line of not wanting to teach her back, but I do think it's something that could be really helpful in school if we got the test taken home. Now, you have to realize that they're fighting people passing it along to somebody else, taking pictures for the next year. I mean, I see their side, it's very tricky. But I think we could maybe dialogue about a way to find time to look at these tests for more than 10 minutes in class.
Well, I also think a lot of it is the foundation. So if you're not getting what's on this test and you can't then go
Building, right?
fix it, aside from a 10-minute conversation, you still don't necessarily get it.
Because they build off of each other, right? So for instance, AP World, everybody is terribly on the first test and they all flip that. Well, the reason is that a lot of sophomores are taking this. It's a college level class. You're not thinking about just dates and times and what happened when. You're thinking of overarching themes and all these different larger concepts. And so they are not necessarily studying that way. They're studying for the dates and the times and what happened. So then if you keep going, you see them almost all improving because they're starting to think differently and thinking of the bigger things. So, again, it's how you study as well and how you build off that material as it goes on through the semester.
I think these kids in general don't really learn how to study.
Yeah.
And I think, it just, like I have one who's starting middle school and it's so different than my older two who sort of all got it. But it's like, What does studying look like? What does taking notes look like? What is reviewing? It's not just reading what you did, but I think it's a really big challenge, and that, you know, even if it were a few weeks, just kind of gearing them up for how to do that, I think.
I think spring of 5th grade is a really good time for that, right? Before you can talk to your schools about that. How are we going to set them up for the fall, right? Kind of reviewing that in 6th grade, doing the same thing at the end of 8th grade into 9th grade. These are some really important transitions that could be really, really helpful to have them. And the other thing I'll say about studying and what you can do at home in the meantime, because we can't also solve this tonight, is that, Jean was saying it was better for her son to start on a Thursday or a Friday. Well, that's important, right? To back up and see how much time you need. But the other thing that's really important, you see all the time, is study for math, study for science. What the heck does that mean, study? Like, what if you look at your planner and like, study? Take the review sheet, break it up. Look at chapter 1 and 2 tonight. Look at units, 3 and 4. Help them break it down so that they're going to study this part tonight. They're going to do the review sheet tonight, and they're going to review the concepts they don't know, and then they're going to do more of the review sheet tonight. So again, break it down to things that they can actually do and check off. Study is not really helpful. All right. Anybody else? More? I'm going to stick around too, so if you have questions. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot that even though all the, I do this, I do this, as students, kids talk, I do this, but I forget.
They forget.
I forget, even to open up the back and look in on, I forget, I did it. I was talking to a friend of mine today, and she said to me, my daughter really does forget. You can talk to her about it, and you leave here, she goes home. I did do it, but she won't take the initiative to look at the planner or look online, and she was really, my friend was really frustrated.
This is actually where it's a good thing about phones. So with a couple of my students who forget all the time, and by the way, the planner just lives in the backpack, it's never going to see the light of day. I said, I just get that thing out of your backpack, I don't want to see it anymore, and put it on your desk, okay? When you go home, you get to take, we made a deal, you get to take a break, you get to take a snack. Your phone is going off at 4:15, and when that phone goes off, that means that you got to go upstairs, sit down, and look at Google Classroom and plan and write down your assignments, because it's not going to do it during the day. All right, it's not going to happen. So let's just live in reality with what can help him. Well, why do I want him to write it down? I want him, like Jean said, to have that habit of a planner. So when he goes off, he uses a planner. But again, it's about the organization. It's helping them think through what they need to do. That's why I'm so big on writing down what you need to do. So that's an idea that where the phone could be helpful. And it goes off apparently every day. And it's working. He is doing it more than he's not doing it.
And that becomes that process goal or outcome goal,
Yeah.
right? Process goal is, it's out, I want to see you doing it, all this week or all next week.
She also said to me that she was told by her daughter's therapist that these checkoffs actually added, okay, good for you, you got it, you got token, add stress. That whole thing about, which I've never heard before. So
I think it's individual.
I believe anything from you, so I think.
No, I work with a lot of kids with anxiety and OCD, and I will say that checking those boxes is such a wonderful thing for them, and it really alleviates their stress. I think it's individual. I don't know that we can blanketly say that that's a good or a bad idea. I say for some students, when they actually write it down, it can be a little stress-inducing because it's the first time they've looked at all the stuff that they have, and they might have to adapt to that. But I laugh. I'm like, you have a test. What's the test on? Well, I haven't studied that. I have a review sheet. Have you opened it? No, it's so big and so long. I want to look at it. Let's look at it. And then we'll look at it. And I'll say, do you know any of these terms? Yeah, I know that. I know what that is. I know what that is. And, yeah, you know so much more than you think you do. And then you kind of talk them off the ledge to this. So. All right. Good? Can we go? Can you go?
Thank you. Thank you so much.